Is being an influencer hard work? No. But also, yes? The thing that frustrates me about the internet is there's just no room for nuance. Because as somebody who quit their day job last year to pursue being a content creator or influencer, and who has had plenty of life experiences in a number of different types of jobs, being an influencer is obviously, to nobody's surprise, one of the easiest, most privileged things I've ever done in my life, while simultaneously being one of the hardest. And it's frustrating because influencing already gets a lot of hate. So when people come on the internet and complain about it and say that it's incredibly difficult and that other people wouldn't understand, and say all of this without putting like a little asterisk beside it, I feel like it just understandably adds fuel to the fire that is the anti-influencer brigade. And I think a lot of creators come onto the internet to like vent about how hard things are because they might not have a lot of people in their real life to talk to about it, or they're hoping to kind of shine a light on some of the realities of being a content creator. That's something I try to do, but again, always with like a little asterisk beside it. Or I think some of these creators have gotten really big, really fast, really young, and therefore don't have a lot of connection to what real life looks like. I am actually really grateful that I have worked a lot of traditional jobs before venturing into self-employment, because it brings with it a lot of perspective and humility. And for most of my working life, I had jobs that had a lot of responsibility, a lot of pressure on my head if I screwed up. When I was in retail, that pressure was around store sales, employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction. And then when I eventually got into my 9-to-5 job, where I stayed until I started doing this, I worked at a research institute where, in addition to like toilets being plugged and renovations happening, I dealt with health and safety and equipment management for research labs. And if those freezers went down with samples in them or a chemical spill happened, the consequences would have been a little bit more severe than me missing a deadline to talk about a hair product. And so in comparison, doing what I do now is an absolute dream. Like what? My work is very much on my own terms. Work for me last week was attending a movie premiere, going to a 5-year anniversary party of a jewelry brand, co-working with my friends smack in the middle of the day, and going through my travel photos and footage to try to find the best clips to make an aesthetic Instagram reel. And probably at least once a week, I just stop what I'm doing, stare into space, and almost cry as I am overcome with gratitude that this is my life. And so anybody who tries to convince you that this is the hardest job in the world probably hasn't had another job, probably doesn't have a lot of like real world experience, and probably like doesn't know or talk to a lot of people that do either. But here's the thing, and this is where like the little asterisk comes into play, because I will always be the first person to talk about how difficult the transition has been from my 9-to-5 to full-time content creating. I will always talk about how this career choice is not a get-rich-quick scheme, and it takes a lot of hard work to be able to even make your first dollar from it, let alone take it full time, or at least in my experience. Because here's the thing, I'm a perfectionist, a procrastinator, and a people pleaser. I take on way too many projects at the same time. My attention span swings back and forth between like unable to focus on anything for longer than 3 seconds to hyper focusing on something for like 18 hours at a time, forgetting to eat, forgetting to hydrate. It worries my husband. I go days without going outside unless it's doing those cool privileged events and co-working things that I talked about earlier. And there's nobody to hold me accountable or check my behaviors other than myself. Personally, I think a lot of this difficulty also comes from the fact that all of my jobs were in person. Even during COVID, I never worked from home. And so I never had the time and space to build up any of these skills, that sort of time management, self-discipline, organizational skills. I didn't have any of it. I literally jumped from working in the office 5 days a week to boom, she's on her own at home every single day. So yes, I do find this job hard. But those are all I statements. And I think that people come online and they share their subjective truth as objective truths, or people hear their subjective truths as objective truths, and then these like dog piles start happening. I just wish that more creators would address some of the privilege and nuance that comes into play when we talk about the difficulties of this job. I know not every TikTok can fit like paragraphs of disclaimers underneath them, which is also why I just hope that as audience members or consumers of content, people can kind of read a bit more between the lines when they're hearing these conversations circulate, where we can acknowledge that there's like pros and cons to every job. There's aspects that are difficult for some people and maybe not for others. I don't know. I think my final comment is just that this is why I think that everyone who becomes an influencer or a YouTuber should like work a job before they do it. Like have some other responsibilities, be around other people, connect with other types of people before you like dive all into this crazy world, because it's gonna skew your sense of reality. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and until next time.